If you think you know what happened,
Two moms disappear from the same playground.
you're wrong. From Brian De Palma. Raising Cain, rated R.
Hello and welcome back to The GOAT, a Brian De Palma fan podcast. And today I am super thrilled to bring on filmmaker Pete Gelderblom. Pete, welcome.
Yes, that's me.
Yeah, and you're joining us from the Netherlands.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Excellent. So for people that might not recognize the name, I wanted to get you on this show because I think the story behind this is just fascinating. So unless I'm mistaken, Brian De Palma only has one released director's cut, and that is Raising Cain, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you're basically responsible for it.
Yeah, it sounds crazy, doesn't it?
I know it's detailed on the internet and it's on the Blu-ray, but can you give people a little bit of the history of what led to you recutting Raising Cain and Brian De Palma deciding that part of the home video release would be including it as his director's cut?
Yeah, I'll do my best. First, a little background. I am a filmmaker in the broadest sense of the word. I do a lot of work for hire, TV commercials, and commissioned films. Besides that, I also direct documentaries, drama, and video essays. But there was a time that I was the founder of a film criticism website called 24 Lies a Second. And it featured a lot of interesting film criticism. And it also had a forum that was quite De Palma-centric. And you know how a forum works, right? Someone will start a thread. And there was this French guy called Laurent Fauchot. And he was a frequent collaborator on this forum. And he had extensively interviewed De Palma for a book he was writing, a French book, a big interview book. And having all this inside information, he mentioned that De Palma wasn't pleased with the structure of Raising Cain. And that immediately piqued my interest. And so I asked, okay, what was the structure then? And Laurent said, yeah, well, I don't know exactly, but it was supposed to start with the story of the wife, Jenny. And immediately it clicked for me because when I saw the movie Raising Cain, I loved the movie, but I was a De Palma freak already. And I remember I was going with my ex-girlfriend, actually, but she knew that I was crazy about De Palma, and I was looking forward to this one because before that he had done Wise Guys and The Bonfire of the Vanities, which I do not exactly consider as the high points of his career. Yeah. So I was looking forward to, De Palma back in form. And I loved the film, but at the same time, I could notice that in the cinema that the people in the cinema that I saw it, they really it didn't click for them. They didn't understand it. They were laughing for the wrong reasons, and I think already after 6 minutes or so, my ex-girlfriend leaned over to me and she said, "What kind of freakish movie is this?" It's like, so I have always known that it's an acquired taste. It's the De Palma film that De Palma lovers actually really like, most of them. But the general public, not so much. And I think one of the reasons is because he played around in the editing a little too much. And at a certain moment, he decided to throw things around, and it actually hurt the film. And that's what he believed himself. And he was talking about it with Laurent Fauchot. So I knew this information, and I had the DVD, and I was playing the DVD, and I was trying with the chapter numbers. Like, okay, so it would have started with this scene in the clock shop, and but I couldn't get it right with the chapters alone. But I knew it would work. It totally made sense for me to start the movie off that way. So at a certain moment, I think it was actually 1 or 2 years later that I decided, okay, I'm going to try this. So I just loaded the DVD into my computer and I started re-editing the film. And I actually asked around if there was maybe a screenplay that I could base myself on. And Jeff Baran, who runs De Palma à la mode, which is a De Palma news site.
Yes, I'm familiar
He
with it.
had an earlier version of the screenplay called Father's Day. And he dug it up somewhere in the dark interweb. I don't know how he got it. So I had this vision of De Palma of what he wanted to make, and there were still it was a little rough around the edges. It wasn't as good as the final film, but the flow was better. And I could more or less base myself with doing the recut on what De Palma was going for. So when it was ready, I thought, okay, this is great. I think the movie is even better now. It would be nice if people could see it. And I thought maybe I should do a video essay on it. And then I asked Matt Zoller-Seitz, who I know from the blog world. I said, I have this recut of Raising Cain, and I'm going to do a video essay. Are you interested to put it on IndieWire? And he said yes, but actually, we would want to see the whole movie actually. And we were thinking, can we do that? Wouldn't Universal Pictures become very angry? And then we decided to do it anyway and to put a banner on it which said, that for educational purposes only. And we thought, whenever Universal starts complaining, we will put it down. We will take it off the internet. They never complained, actually.
And this was on Vimeo, right?
It's still on the internet.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I believe that's how I was initially familiar with it. And last I checked, the Vimeo link was still there.
Yeah. But definitely see the Blu-ray version, though, because the quality is a lot better.
Yeah.
But anyway, we put it up on the internet, and I think a year later or so, I saw interviews with De Palma, which explained that he actually had found it himself, and that he preferred it over his own cut, which is madness, of course. And I thought, well, that's great. But I thought, okay, so that's it, and great. And at a certain moment, I was in Scotland. I was filming in Scotland. And suddenly I got this message late in the evening. And it was Jeff from De Palma à la mode. And he messaged me. He said, wow, look what I got in the mail. And it was a note by Brian De Palma. And I have the note right here.
Oh, wow.
In De Palma's words, he said, "Hi, Jeff. I just saw the Raising Cain recut, and I think it's great. It's what we didn't accomplish in the initial release of the film. It's what I originally wanted the movie to be. Could you contact the company releasing the Blu-ray and tell them I think it's important they include it with the new release? If you need me to talk to some at the company, just give me a number and a name. And congratulations to Pete Gelderblom. He's restored the true story of Raising Cain. Thanks, Brian De Palma."
Amazing.
Yeah. So as I was floating on air for about a week with his message, and I thought, however this turns out, I'm going to cooperate. This has to be done. If he wants this cut on the Blu-ray, and I certainly want it myself, then I'll make sure to supervise it. But because basically he just said, I want this cut on the Blu-ray. But of course, my cut was done from the DVD.
Yeah.
So I thought, we should have the real master and do it for real.
That's awesome. And from what I understand, that was like, not including this was a non-starter for De Palma. Like, there wouldn't be the Shout Factory Blu-ray if this cut wasn't included on the release.
Yeah, if you watch the documentary about Brian De Palma, he's actually complaining. He's complaining again about this structure that he felt it didn't work and it should have started another way. So I think he was frustrated about it.
Yeah.
But as a filmmaker, he's a kind of guy like, okay, onwards, next movie. He doesn't really look back. But in this case, I think he was really pleased that someone actually took the time to fix it.
Yeah, I actually watched the segment on the De Palma documentary about Raising Cain last night before we got ready to sit down here. And yeah, I think he said that he kind of psyched himself out and got so excited or so drawn in by Lithgow's performance that he was like, we have to front load the film with the Lithgow stuff, and it almost feels like he second guessed his instincts, and nobody stopped him.
Yeah, that is certainly what he has been saying, and there was also this thing that the original structure asked for a giant flashback, like a flashback of 20 minutes or something. And that had not been done before. So he was worried, will we lose the audience with this? So there were things, yeah, and he was doubtful. But I think what also plagued him is that he was working it with one or two editors in the beginning, and it didn't work out. I think they didn't really have a feel for what he was going for. And then he asked his old collaborator, Paul Hirsch, to come over and basically fix it. Paul Hirsch is an absolutely excellent editor who also edited Carrie and Star Wars and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And I read his book, and he actually explains that he was somewhere else and he had to take the plane over to Brian De Palma in order to edit. And he was reading the screenplay on the plane. And he says in the book, I didn't get it. And I started over. He started over. And he still didn't get it. And so he met De Palma and they talked about it. And he still didn't get it. And why didn't he get it? Well, you have to understand that De Palma, with Raising Cain, he was trying to up his game. He was trying to walk a tightrope. As an audience, you're constantly second guessing. And his thing was like, normally with this kind of mystery movie, you go with a police officer and you assemble information, and every piece of information leads you closer to the solution, right? And his joke in the film was actually that what if every piece of information you're getting is worthless? What if every piece of information cannot be trusted because it's part of a dream or it's part of a memory or people are thinking different things? So that was actually the playground he had in mind. So it was really a tightrope situation. It's like if you would go too far, and for some he has gone too far. Yeah. But if you go too far, then the audience will think, well, this is madness.
Yeah, I do like the fact that you mentioned that it was sort of De Palma returning to a sandbox he had played in a decade or so earlier, and was coming off of those less than sort of critically or commercially successful films. So it definitely makes sense that he would have gotten a little bit more creative, if you will, in terms of his approach to storytelling. One thing I wanted to just see while we were talking through this, I almost wonder if De Palma and his approach to storytelling influenced sort of the decade that followed in films, where you got filmmakers like Christopher Nolan experimenting with sequencing and time within movies, and Tarantino. I never really thought about it until you just mentioned it, but do you think at all that De Palma and his approach, even if somebody saw that script, would have been sort of inspired by that approach to storytelling?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they would have been inspired by Raising Cain as it was actually released, but I do think that the audience was maybe more ready for it
Yes.
since, Memento by Christopher Nolan and what was the other one you said? Yeah,
Well,
of course,
Tarantino.
Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the audience was more used to it that kind of thing can happen in a film.
Yeah.
So it definitely helped the recut. And I'm not sure how people would have reacted if he would have released it the way he thought he would make it.
Yeah.
But it was a real struggle in the edit. He couldn't really get it right, and I think part of the problem is that his editors didn't really
Get it.
understand what he was going for.
Yeah.
And sometimes the editor has to help the director, but because there's one little thing that I'm doing, and it's actually something that De Palma hates, but I'm repeating a little bit of a scene just to make sure that the audience is with us. And in order to do that, I had to find an establishing shot. And Brian De Palma, I don't know if you know, but
Yes.
he doesn't do establishing shots.
Yes.
If he does one, he makes sure it's like a crane, and you'll see a street, and then the crane goes down, and then somebody comes closer, and then a scene is starting.
Yeah.
And that's what I also had to get. There's this epilogue in the film which plays in the park, and I had to lift the beginning of a shot there and make a counter movement in order to make it a sort of establishing shot. That was the only thing I could think of. I didn't have footage that was left on the cutting room floor, of course.
Yeah. Well, obviously, it didn't bother De Palma enough for him to say, don't include this. That is one thing I did want to point out, though, that I think is amazing about this director's cut is it's virtually the same film, but just resequenced. There, like you said, there's no inserted, deleted scenes. There's no removed scenes or anything like that. And I think that's the amazing thing about it is you can take this film that plays fine in its theatrical version, but not add or take anything away, just reorder. And it puts the film in a new light and makes it possibly accessible for a certain percentage of the audience, and that's the thing I think is fascinating about that director's cut.
Yeah, and it's also the film itself now has a split personality, right?
Yes, which is very De Palma. I don't want to get too into the weeds on this, but you talked about recutting the recut for the Blu-ray release. Do you want to talk a little bit about the mechanics behind that without I guess getting too incredibly technical, but what elements were you working from?
Well, it was done with the master, and I wanted to do it myself, but actually they didn't allow me to do it myself. So I had to supervise from a distance. So somebody else did it for me, and I basically said, well, here's my recut, and it has to be like this. And then they made traditions and they sent it back to me. And then I said, no, the tradition you have to make sure that the sound is faded in a lot earlier. And, so that's the way how we did it. And there was also a thing with the lawyers from Universal. We had to make sure, we had to explain to them in advance that nothing would be added to the film and nothing would be taken away, because that would have been a legal problem as well. So it was just sheer luck that my re-edit, well, I didn't have anything else. I could have carved out scenes, but of course I didn't.
Yeah.
Because I like the movie. But that actually works out. It repeats a little bit, but we left that piece of information out to the lawyers because they wouldn't understand, I think.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Blu-ray, and it was actually I got the Blu-ray within the last, I want to say, 2 months, and that's what's it's probably around the time I reached out to you and we finally made this happen. But so the director's cut is included on the Blu-ray, and that original video essay is included as well, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I made a special edit of it. Yeah, that's the only thing that I requested. I've worked on it for free, but I said I really want to make sure that my name is mentioned because because I was the person behind it. So I made sure that the video essay was on it, and I also shot a sort of introduction
Yeah.
that people can watch before they watch the edit.
Yeah, it really is a special release, and I can't even imagine how good it must feel every time you see that sitting on the shelf and knowing that that release as it is would not exist without your participation in sort of resurrecting Raising Cain in its original vision.
Yeah, it does feel good. Actually, I'm on IMDb under Raising Cain. I'm now one of the editors,
That's
which
amazing.
is really cool.
Yeah, yeah. So, as you know, as our listeners know, every episode is normally built around a film and a particular sequence. And I know you've talked Raising Cain to death, and rightfully so. But I did want to offer you the opportunity while we were preparing to sit down and chat. I asked you if there was another De Palma film you might want to look at and a particular scene. And I'm so happy that you picked a scene from De Palma's 10th film, 1978's The Fury. Do you want to talk a little bit about The Fury and, your exposure to it
Sure.
before we get to the actual scene?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't think it's one of his better films.
Neither does he.
It hasn't aged particularly well. It's an odd mix of colors. It's part horror movie, part spy thriller, and with some really awkward, funny bits thrown in. And the character of Kirk Douglas doesn't work for me like at all. But at the time, this was the best thing De Palma could get off the ground. And he got big studio money to do The Fury because he had a lot of success with Carrie, which was a story about a teenage girl with telekinesis.
Yeah.
In the eyes of the average Hollywood suit, there is no better way than to follow that up with another movie about a teenage girl with telekinesis. And maybe because De Palma felt he was repeating himself, his heart wasn't really into it. So the movie as a whole doesn't seem very inspired, but there are scenes in there that are very clearly and inspired, and they are probably the reasons why he agreed to take the job to begin with. There are wonderful set pieces in The Fury. There are vintage De Palma, and most of them involve Amy Irving having these visions. And I'm talking about the scene on the staircase most of all, when she touches the hand of the person who she is walking with down the stairs, and all of a sudden she has this vision of Robin, and the way De Palma visualizes this vision is so unique to him.
Yes.
Yeah. Normally, when someone has a vision on screen, there's a flash, and the filmmaker simply cuts to a different time and place. And like Christopher Walken in The Dead Zone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the same scene. He's touching the future president's hand, cut to a flash forward scene of the guy pushing the red button.
Yeah.
That's the classic way, and even a pro like Cronenberg does it like that, but not De Palma. As soon as Amy touches the hand of the person, you have these flash cuts getting closer and closer to the hand she's touching, and it features a scar. You can see it, in a split second. And next thing you see is Amy alone in the room, and she's kind of still on the staircase, but at the same time, she isn't. She's literally inside her vision of what happened earlier on the same spot, which reveals where the scar is from. And just as Amy is momentarily lost inside this vision, we as the audience feel like we're falling into the film. It's like a dizzying moment with the camera swirling around. You're like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that no one of the crew understood what De Palma was going for, because it's a very elaborate vision involving process shots of Amy before green screen, a matching circular movement of the camera on both the foreground and the background.
Yeah.
And slow motion mixed with real time and cutting back and forth between Amy's vision and her reality. It's insane.
Yeah.
And
yeah. And I also do want to shout out John Williams' score during this sequence. His score throughout the film is very sort of, I want to say it's very Hitchcockian. It's a gutsy John Williams score, in my opinion. And the other thing I did want to mention is you talked about how complex it is from a technical standpoint, but watching the scene back and watching the film back prior to sitting down for this is a lot of times when you're doing those process shots, sometimes by the time they got the shot, assembled the way they needed, you were on like third or fourth generation. But the one thing that stands out to me about that sequence is the clarity that exists within that shot. Is it doesn't look heavily processed, which also I think really screws with your mind a little bit, because a lot of times we're aware we're watching a special effect or some kind of trick being played, and in that sequence, it's really that one thing I'll say about it is it has a very modern feel to it, and I think a lot of filmmakers, are working with that sort of virtual reality idea. It's almost like Amy Irving's character was dropped into a virtual reality environment.
Exactly. Yeah, and I would just say to filmmakers, look at this, at these examples, because De Palma is not being lazy. He gives you a vision that you've never seen before, and I think that's so cool that he does that.
Well, the one thing I've always said that I love about De Palma is he knows he's making a movie, and as an audience, we know we're watching a movie, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think a lot of times is we're going to the movies to escape things. We don't have to feel like we're experiencing real life, and that's the thing I've always appreciated about De Palma is everybody, when you sign up to watch a De Palma movie, you're signing up to watch a movie, and you're gonna let certain things go, or you're gonna let certain things take you over, and I think a lot of filmmakers sometimes take the art of film a little too seriously.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yes, and he's the opposite of an invisible narrator. He's very visible as a director, as there's a director behind the scenes, but at the same time, he's so seductive and convincing that you're watching a movie, and at the same time you're into the movie.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, no, and I also think that any sequence in a De Palma film that you might question, he'll be able to defend, which is also one thing I've seemed to have picked up from him as a filmmaker and as a visionary is when he's got an idea in his head that he wants to execute, he's going to execute it, and they have to figure out how to execute it. And I love that's one of the things I love about De Palma is he doesn't just settle. If he wants to do something, he's going to do it. And the world needs more people like that.
It's probably the reason why he wants to do it. That's what he wants to do. He's a visual artist, so it has to be done his way. Otherwise, it makes no sense.
Yeah. Thank you so much for those notes on The Fury. I think you perfectly illustrated it, and it's a film I hadn't watched in quite a while because, like you said, it's not one of his best. De Palma even admits it was more of a paycheck movie, for lack of a better term. But I still enjoyed it. Your criticisms are totally valid, but that sequence on the staircase with Charles Durning is just amazing. And thank you so much for picking that sequence, because I always love talking through movies and sequences that we might not be aware of when we think about, classic De Palma shots.
Yeah, because there are lots of them, lots of great scenes in De Palma.
Yeah.
So,
well, hopefully you can come on again and we can talk about another one of those. But for now, we're out of time. And I do want to thank you, Pete. Is there a place that people could best find your works, or how to stay up to date on you? I'll put all this information in the show notes, of course, as well.
Yeah, I have a website called directorama.net, and that is just my personal portfolio. So
all right, excellent. I'll include that in the notes. And again, I do hope that we can sit down and chat another De Palma film at some time in the future. You have an open invite, so anytime you have an opening in your schedule or your calendar, and you say, you know what, let me call up Craig and see if he wants to chat again, because I'm always ready for it.
Cool, Craig. Let's do that.
All right, thanks again.
All right, see you.